She was dressed for a celebration. A beautiful black woman. Honey golden skin, gorgeous curls falling over her shoulders, a burgundy velvet gown she had chosen carefully, wanting them to see her at her best. She had walked into that mansion with her spine straight and her chin high, telling herself what she always told herself before entering a room that did not want her there. You do not need their approval to deserve to be here. She sat at that table. She smiled when they didn't. She stayed quiet when they weren't. For 2 years she had done this, absorbed the whispers, the strategic silences, the comments designed to land just soft enough to be deniable. For 2 years she had chosen love over comfort, and stayed, and stayed, and stayed. And then the oldest woman in the room, the matriarch, 84 years old, the iron core of one of the most powerful Korean crime dynasties in the world, walked the full length of that table with her cane and stopped beside her chair and told her to get out. In front of everyone. No raised voice, no drama, just 38 pairs of eyes watching a black woman be expelled from a room like she was something that didn't belong in the story. She stood. She picked up her clutch. She walked the full length of that marble floor, every step echoing, every eye on her, and she did not break. Not once. She stepped outside into the cold November rain, soaked through within seconds, standing alone on that stone path with nowhere to go and no one coming for her. Or so they thought. Because what they did not know, what that entire family, with all their power and all their pride, had completely failed to see, was that the man they were trying to protect her from was already waiting. And he had not come alone. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click join to become a member and help our channel. The rain had not yet started. That would come later. The kind of rain that arrives without warning. The kind that feels, in retrospect, like the sky had been planning it all along. But for now, the night was still. Cold and still, and full of crystal glasses catching the light of 100 chandeliers inside the Choi estate. Jordan Marie stood at the top of the staircase for exactly 3 seconds before descending. 3 seconds was all she allowed herself. 3 seconds to look at the room below, the white flowers arranged with surgical precision, the silk suits, the elders seated at the long table like a council from another century. And to remind herself of the single sentence that had carried her through 2 years of this family's silence. You do not need their approval to deserve to be here. Then she descended. Her heels met the marble, and the sound carried. It always did. In a room like this one, every sound made by Jordan Marie carried. Because every ear in that room had been trained, consciously or otherwise, to hear her differently. Not with malice, not always, but with that particular frequency of alertness that registers the unfamiliar as something requiring monitoring. She had learned to walk through that alertness like weather. You don't fight it, you move through it. She moved through it now, crossing the edge of the salon with the gold clutch pressed softly against her side, scanning the room for the one face that would anchor her. Yeonjun's face. But Yeonjun was not there. He had sent a message 40 minutes ago. Running late, business. I'll be there before dinner, I promise you. And she had read it standing in that enormous guest bathroom, reading it twice, and then setting her phone face down on the marble counter and breathing for 30 seconds the way she'd learned to breathe when the ground felt unstable. She was used to the ground feeling unstable inside this house. What she had never quite grown used to, and suspected she never would, was the particular cruelty of being invisible and hypervisible at the same time, to be looked at constantly and seen not at all. To have people arrange their bodies slightly away from her in conversation, while still tracking her every movement from the corners of their eyes. The cousin, the youngest daughter of Yeonjun's eldest uncle, a woman of 26 named Hyejin, who spoke perfect English and used it as a weapon with the precision of someone who had spent years sharpening it, drifted near Jordan with a glass of champagne and a smile that had never once reached her eyes. "Jordan, you look..." A pause, the kind calibrated to land. "Brave, in that color." Jordan smiled. "Thank you, Hyejin." "Yeon oppa isn't here yet?" "He's on his way." Hyejin tilted her glass. "He's always so busy. You must be used to waiting for him by now." There were 1,000 things Jordan could have said. She had rehearsed many of them in the car on the drive over, not because she planned to use them, but because having them ready made her feel less like prey. She said none of them. She nodded once, warmly, and turned her attention to the flower arrangement on the nearest table, as if it had just said something extraordinarily interesting. Hyejin drifted away. Mission accomplished. Not enough to be called anything, if confronted. Just enough. Just enough was the specialty of this family. The elder women, the aunts, the wives of uncles, sat together near the bay windows in the way that women who have held real power for decades sit. Not loudly, not visibly, but as a unit with its own gravitational field. They spoke in low Korean, and though Jordan's Korean was functional enough to navigate basic conversations, the speed and register of their speech in moments like this was always just fast enough to exclude her without technically excluding her. She caught fragments. She recognized the cadence of gossip. She recognized twice the particular drop in register that meant a name was being avoided on purpose. She suspected that name was hers. At the far end of the room, seated in the high-backed chair that had been carried from the original Choi family home 30 years ago, not because it was comfortable, but because it was the chair, sat Halmoni Choi, 84 years old, 4 feet 11 inches of Korean matriarchal authority concentrated into a woman who had outlasted 3 government administrations, 2 family schisms, and 1 attempt on her grandson's life that she handled by personally identifying the responsible party and allowing Yeonjun to do what Yeonjun did. She had not yet looked at Jordan directly tonight. That was, in itself, a statement. Jordan understood it. She had learned, in 2 years, to read this family's silences the way a sailor reads the sky. Not for what was there, but for what was forming. And what was forming tonight had a weight to it that she had not felt before. Something had shifted. Some decision had been made in some room she had not been invited into. She took a glass of water from a passing tray. She drank it slowly. She reminded herself, quietly, that she had built a studio from nothing. That she had designed interiors for clients who told her she was too young, too different, too much, that she had survived every version of "you don't belong here" that life had offered. And she was still standing with her spine straight and her chin up, and her gachos falling perfectly around her face, despite the humidity that always crept into this estate from the garden. Dinner was announced. Yeonjun had not arrived. She was seated, and this was deliberate, she had no doubt, at the far corner of the long table, between a great-uncle who spoke no English and an empty chair that should have been Yeonjun's. She was separated from the center of conversation by 9 people and a deliberate geography of placement. She sat. She unfolded her napkin. She put it in her lap. She did it all with the unhurried elegance of a woman who refuses, under any circumstances, to let you see her falter. The meal progressed in Korean. The great-uncle to her left ate steadily and said nothing. The empty chair to her right said everything. It was during the second course that Hae-jin leaned across 2 seats to speak to Jordan directly in English. Loudly enough to be heard, quietly enough to be deniable. "You know," she said with that surgical smile, "I've always admired how you keep coming back. Most people, after a while, take a hint." Jordan set down her fork. Not dropped, set, with control. "I'm here," she said, "because Yunjun asked me to be here. And because I love him. And because I don't take hints from people who aren't him." The table felt the shift. Not everyone understood the English, but everyone understood the tone. Hae-jin's smile thinned. She sat back. And it was at that exact moment, the moment of silence that followed, that particular taut silence, that the sound of the chair at the head of the table shifted. And then the slow, deliberate tap of a wooden cane on marble began. Harmony Choi was standing. She was small and she was ancient, and she crossed the length of that table the way glaciers cross landscapes. Without hurry, without doubt, and with an absolute certainty that she would reshape whatever she touched. She stopped beside Jordan's chair. Jordan looked up at her, met her eyes, did not look away. Harmony spoke. Her Korean was low and measured and absolute. Everyone at the table heard it. The room went so quiet that the chandeliers seemed louder. Hae-jin translated. She could not hide the satisfaction in her voice, though she tried. "She says this house has a lineage, a story that began long before any of us were born. She says some things, a beat, do not belong in that story. She asks that you gather your things and leave the property." The sentence landed. Jordan did not flinch. She would not give them the flinch. She had promised herself that once in a mirror, and she kept her promises. She looked at Harmony for a long moment. Then she nodded, not in submission, but in the particular way a person nods when they have decided that a room is no longer worth their language. She picked up her clutch. She rose from the chair with the steadiness of someone who has stood up from harder things. She did not look at Hae-jin. She did not look at the aunts by the window. She looked straight ahead, across the length of that dining room, at the door. Her heels on the marble, the sound of them carrying, the way they always did. She walked the full length of the room, every eye on her, and she did not break stride once. She did not look back. She pushed open the front door of the Choi estate and stepped onto the stone steps. And the sky, which had been holding its breath all night, finally let go. The rain came down hard and cold and immediate, soaking through the velvet of her dress within seconds, flattening the gold of her earrings against her neck, running in thin rivers through her curls. She stood at the top of the steps and looked out at the long, dark driveway, and she felt, for one very human moment, entirely alone. She walked down the steps. She stopped on the stone path. She did not reach for her phone. She did not cry. She just stood there in the rain with her spine straight and her chin level, the gold clutch pressed against her chest, and she breathed. And then the driveway began to fill with light. The lights came slowly at first, a single glow at the far end of the driveway, beyond the iron gate, moving with the unhurried certainty of something that had never once needed to rush. Then a second light appeared behind it. Then a third. Then two more, fanning out in the darkness like a formation that had been rehearsed so many times it had become instinct. 5 vehicles, all black, all moving in absolute silence except for the deep, even roll of tires on wet stone. Jordan did not move. She stood in the rain with the velvet of her dress soaked through and her curls pressed against the sides of her face, and she watched those lights approach the way you watch something you have been half expecting without ever letting yourself fully believe it would come. The rational part of her mind was already calculating logistics. She needed her phone, she needed a car service, she needed to get out of this driveway before the family sent someone out to confirm she had actually left. But some other, quieter part of her had simply stopped, had gone still. Because something about those lights, about the particular precision of that formation, made the rational part go very, very quiet. The SUVs entered through the iron gate one by one and arranged themselves along the driveway in a slow, deliberate arc. The way they moved was not the movement of drivers responding to a situation. It was the movement of an operation that had been anticipated, prepared for, timed. The middle vehicle, the largest, slightly longer than the others, the one with the tinted rear window that caught the rain in long silver streaks, stopped closest to her. Its door opened before it had fully stopped moving, and Trey Yun-jun stepped out into the rain. He was not dressed for rain. The long black coat absorbed it immediately, darkening at the shoulders, but he moved through it the way he moved through everything, as if the weather had not received the information that it was supposed to affect him. His jaw was set. His eyes found Jordan before anything else in that driveway, before the house, before the light from the open front door where, she now knew, people were watching. His eyes found her the way a compass finds north, without searching. He walked toward her and stopped 2 feet away. Up close, she could see what she had learned over 2 years to read in his face. The particular tension at the corners of his jaw that meant something cold had settled in him. Something that had moved past anger into the territory beyond anger, where decisions get made that cannot be unmade. The dragon tattoos on his neck seemed darker in the rain, more defined, like everything about him had been turned up a degree. He did not speak immediately. He looked at her, at the soaked velvet, at the rain running through her curls, at the clutch still pressed against her chest like armor, at her face, which had not broken, and something moved through his expression that he did not bother to conceal from her. He had never bothered to conceal things from her. It was, she had come to understand, the most intimate thing about him. Then he reached up and pulled off his coat. He placed it around her shoulders without asking. His hands were warm even through the fabric. She felt the weight of it settle, the smell of him, cedar wood and something colder underneath, rain and iron and a particular kind of quiet that only belonged to people who had learned never to raise their voice because they had never needed to. He turned toward the house. The front door was still open. Light spilled down the stone steps and caught the rain in amber. And in that doorway, shapes were gathering. The silhouettes of family members who had heard the cars, who had come to look, who now stood pressed slightly behind one another the way people stand when they are uncertain whether they are watching a spectacle or an event with consequences. Harmony was not in the doorway. She was seated in the hallway just beyond it, her cane across her knees, her back straight, watching through the frame with eyes that had watched 70 years of Choi family history and had never once been wrong about what she was seeing. Yun-jun looked at all of them. When he spoke in Korean. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. In the years Jordan had known him, she had come to understand that the quieter his voice got, the more completely a room belonged to him. He said what he said slowly, in the measured cadence of a man delivering a verdict rather than an argument. And when he was finished, there was no sound in the driveway except the rain on the hoods of 5 black SUVs. The great-uncle near the back of the doorway crowd said something, a single sentence, questioning in its intonation. Yeonjun answered it with 4 words. The great-uncle did not speak again. Jordan did not need a translation for the general shape of what had been said. She had learned to read that, too. The architecture of power inside this family. Who deferred to whom, where the weight of a sentence landed, and how. And what she read now was that something had shifted irrevocably. A line had been drawn not in sand, but in the kind of material that does not wash away with rain. He turned back to her. "I know what happened," he said, low, for her alone. "I know." She met his eyes. "How long have you known it was going to happen?" He held her gaze. "Long enough." She absorbed that, turned it over. She was not angry, not at him, not precisely. She understood, in the way that 2 years of loving a man like this teaches you to understand, that there is a difference between predicting a storm and being able to stop it. That sometimes you let a thing arrive, because the arriving of it is the only proof that changes anything. "You let them," she said. Not an accusation. A statement of fact, the way she had learned to speak to him, directly, without the performance of softness she gave the rest of the world. "I let them show you who they are," he said. "I wanted you to see it clearly, without me in the room." "Why?" He looked at her for a long moment. The rain ran down the line of his jaw. The tattoos on his neck caught the light from the SUVs behind him, and for a moment he looked like something from a story someone had told a long time ago, about men who carried entire worlds in their silence. "Because what I'm going to do next," he said, "you needed to deserve." She frowned slightly. "Yeonjun." "Not deserve from me," he said. "From yourself. You needed to know." He paused, choosing the word with the precision of a man who trusted very few of them. "That you stayed not because leaving was hard, but because you chose to stay. Every time. Even when it cost you." Jordan looked at him. The rain between them, the light from the mansion, the shapes in the doorway that had gone very still. "You have a strange way of showing love," she said. Something shifted in his face. Not quite a smile, but the private geography of one. The version of him that only she received. "I have been told." He reached into the inner pocket of his coat, the coat that was now around her shoulders, and his hand closed around something she could not yet see. But she felt the shift, the particular intake of the moment. Behind them, one of the drivers had stepped out and was standing at attention near the rear SUV. The others remained still. Rain gathered in the dip of every roof. The driveway was lit by 5 sets of headlights arranged in that arc, and from the mansion doorway, the scene must have looked like theater. The cold, dramatic light, the man and the woman in the rain, the family watching from the warm interior of a house that had, minutes ago, been entirely certain of itself. Halmoni had moved to the doorway now. She stood at the top of the steps with her cane, and she looked at her grandson and she saw something in his face that she had not seen in 34 years of watching him grow into the man and the myth and the force that he had become. She saw it and she understood it, and it was the first time in the memory of everyone present that Harmony Choi's expression contained something other than certainty. What it contained instead was the beginning of a reckoning. Jordan felt Yeonjun's hand emerge from the coat pocket. She felt the quality of the air change the way it changes before something that cannot be taken back. She looked down. In his palm, rain-wet, catching the light from the fleet of black SUVs, held out not as an offering but as a statement, was a ring box. Small, dark leather, open. The diamond inside was not large the way things chosen for display are large. It was precise. It was blinding. It sat in a setting of white gold so clean, it looked like something that had been waiting in that box for years, patient and absolute, for exactly this rain, exactly this driveway, exactly this woman standing in a soaked velvet dress with her spine straight and her chin level, and her curls catching every drop of light the night had to offer. He looked at her. "Jordan Murray," he said. Quiet. Certain. In the rain, in front of his family, in front of the fleet that announced to anyone watching exactly what kind of man was asking. "Will you marry me?" The doorway behind them was completely silent. The rain continued, indifferent and steady and perfect. And Jordan Marie, who had walked the full length of that dining room without breaking stride, who had stood in the rain without reaching for her phone, who had pressed a gold clutch against her chest like a shield and refused to give anyone in that house the satisfaction of her fracture, took a breath. She looked at the ring for a long time, not because she was uncertain. Jordan Marie had not been uncertain about Choi Yeonjun since the night 14 months into their relationship, when she had watched him sit on the floor of her studio at 2 a.m, surrounded by fabric samples and mood boards she had been agonizing over for a client who kept changing his mind, and he had picked up each sample one by one and listened. Genuinely listened. Not with the performative patience of a man waiting for his turn to speak, but with the focused attention of someone for whom the thing mattering to you was sufficient reason for it to matter to him. She had not been uncertain since that night. She looked at the ring because the moment deserved to be inhabited fully, because she had earned the right to stand in it without rushing. The rain fell between them, steady and cold, and Yeonjun did not move. He held the box open with the patience of a man who had learned, at great cost, that the things worth having cannot be hurried. His eyes were on her face, not on the doorway, not on his family arranged in the lit frame of the entrance like a painting that had not yet decided what it was a painting of. Only on her. She raised her eyes to his. "Yes," she said. Not loudly. She did not need loudly. The word was for him, and it reached him, and that was the only direction that mattered. Something moved through his face then. Not relief exactly, because Yeonjun was not a man who had allowed himself to fear the answer. Something older than relief. Something that looked, to Jordan, like a man setting down a weight he had been carrying so long he had stopped noticing it was there. He took the ring from the box with steady hands and placed it on her finger. The white gold was cold from the rain. The diamond caught the headlights and held them. He closed his hand around hers for a moment. Just that. And then, from the doorway of the Choi estate, came a sound that none of the drivers, none of the family members in their silk and their certainty, and certainly not Hye-jin with her surgical smile, none of them had anticipated. Harmony Choi made a sound. It was not a word. It was not Korean or English or any language that required a tongue to form. It was the sound that lives in the body before language arrives. The sound of something breaking open that had been sealed for a very long time. It was one syllable, or less than one,
and it came from the top of the stone steps, where the old woman stood with her cane and her 84 years and her absolute authority. And it stopped every person in that driveway completely still. Jordan looked up at her. Hangmoni was not crying. Not quite. Her eyes held the brightness of tears that had not yet decided to fall, which was, in its own way, more devastating to witness than tears would have been. She was looking at her grandson, at the way he stood in the rain with his hand closed around the hand of the woman she had just expelled from her house. And she was seeing, Jordan understood this with a clarity that surprised her. She was seeing something she recognized. Something from her own history that she had not expected to meet again in this driveway, in this rain. In the face of a woman she had decided, without ever truly looking, was not part of the story. The great uncle who had asked a single question and been silenced by 4 words, now said nothing at all. Hee-jin had taken a small step back into the crowd. The aunts near the window had turned from their position to face the doorway, and their faces held the particular expression of women recalculating in real time, adding new information to equations they had believed were already solved. Yeonjun looked up at the doorway. He spoke again in Korean. This time his voice carried a different weight. Not the flat verdict of before, but something with texture in it. Something that cost him. The gathered family listened. He spoke for nearly a minute without interruption. Jordan caught pieces. Her name several times, and the word for family, and a phrase she had heard him use once before in a context that had confused her at the time, and now, hearing it in this context, she began to understand. It was a phrase that, translated closely, meant something like, "The one who stays when staying is hard." When he finished, the driveway was quiet enough to hear the rain on the stone. Hangmoni descended the steps. It was slow, each step deliberate, the cane taking weight, the small body carrying itself with that particular dignity that belongs only to people who have lived long enough to have nothing left to prove. She came down all 7 steps and crossed the stone path and stopped in front of Jordan. Up close, Jordan could see her fully for the first time that evening. The fine lines mapping 84 years of decisions. The eyes that were sharp and dark and completely present. The hands around the cane. One of them, Jordan noticed, was trembling slightly. Not from age. From something else. Hangmoni looked at Jordan's face. Really looked. The way she had not looked all evening. The way she had withheld the simple dignity of being seen and now offered it, fully, without reservation, as if she were handing back something she should never have taken. She spoke in Korean, quietly, directly to Jordan. Jordan looked at Yeonjun. He translated. His voice was very careful. She says she has looked at you 3 times tonight. The first time, she saw your skin. The second time, she saw her grandson's face when he looks at you. A pause. The third time, just now, she saw you walk out of her house. Jordan waited. She says a woman who walks like that. His jaw tightened slightly, working through the words. Does not walk like someone who has been defeated. She walks like someone who has decided the room was beneath her. The trembling hand released the cane and reached out. Hangmoni placed her palm against Jordan's cheek. The hand was warm and dry despite the rain, and it cupped her face with a gentleness that had no performance in it. The gentleness of someone who was not doing it for the room, not doing it for the family watching from the doorway, not doing it for any reason except that her hands had decided before her mind had finished arguing. She said one more thing. Very short. 4 words in Korean. Yeonjun was quiet for a moment after she said it. Jordan looked at him. What did she say? He met her eyes.
Something in his expression was careful in the way that men are careful when they are protecting themselves from their own feeling. She said, "She has your mother's walk."
Jordan Marie, who had pressed a gold clutch against her chest like armor and walked the full length of a dining room without breaking, who had stood in the cold rain without reaching for her phone, who had received a proposal and said yes in one word without drama or performance, felt something move through her chest that was not grief and was not joy, but was the particular ache of being finally, fully seen by the person you had stopped expecting it from. She did not cry. She breathed. She let the old woman's hand stay against her face for 3 more seconds, and then she reached up and placed her own hand over Halmoni's, gently, briefly, and then released it. Behind Halmoni, the family in the doorway was rearranging itself. Not dramatically, not in any single visible moment, but the geometry was shifting. The way a room shifts when the highest authority in it changes its position and everyone else recalibrates without being told to. Haejin had moved to the back. The aunts had moved forward. The great-uncle had gone inside. A younger cousin, a girl of perhaps 16 whom Jordan had barely spoken to before tonight, had come to the edge of the doorway and was watching Jordan with an expression that was not yet anything definable, but was absolutely, completely paying attention. Yeonjun placed his hand at the small of Jordan's back. She felt the warmth of it through the wet velvet, the anchor of it. He looked at his grandmother. Something passed between them, that compressed, efficient communication of people who have known each other through every version of themselves, and Halmoni nodded once, turned, began the slow journey back toward the steps. The family parted for her, the way they always did. But something in the parting was different now. The hierarchy was the same, and simultaneously, quietly, completely altered. Because hierarchies are sustained by consensus, and the consensus in the Che family had, in the span of one rain-soaked driveway, shifted its weight. Jordan looked at the ring on her finger, rain-wet, catching every light the night offered. She thought about the woman in the mirror at the top of the staircase, the one who had given herself 3 seconds and the sentence that had carried her through 2 years of careful, deliberate exclusion. She thought about what that woman had known and what she hadn't, what she had prepared for and what had found her anyway, the way the best and worst things always do. Sideways, in the rain, when you are standing still enough to receive them. The fleet of black SUVs idled behind them, patient and enormous, their headlights holding the driveway in amber. Yeonjun leaned close to her ear. "Are you warm enough?" She looked at him. His coat was still around her shoulders. He was standing in the rain in his shirt and his ruined Oxford shoes, and he was asking if she was warm enough. "No," she said. "Good," he said. "Let's go inside." She looked at the doorway, at the family beyond it rearranging, at the 16-year-old cousin still watching from the edge. "Inside your house," she said. "Our house," he said. Simply. Finally. Jordan Marie straightened her spine, not because she needed to, not as armor this time, but as the natural posture of a woman who had just become something she had always been and simply needed the world to catch up to. She walked up the steps of the Choi estate for the 2nd time that night. This time, no one stepped aside. They made room. The house felt different from the inside, Jordan noticed it the moment she crossed the threshold. The way a room changes not because anything in it has moved, but because the thing organizing it has shifted. The chandeliers were the same. The white flowers were the same. The long table still held the remains of a dinner that had been abandoned mid-course. Glasses half full, napkins unfolded beside plates that no one had thought to clear because something more important than dinner had happened in the driveway, and everyone was still processing the weight of it. But the room that had arranged itself against her an hour ago was now arranging itself around her. And that was a different thing entirely. Yunjun walked beside her, not ahead, not behind, beside. His hand had moved from the small of her back to her hand. His fingers laced through hers with the easy certainty of a man who had decided something irrevocable and felt, for the first time in a long time, completely unambiguous about a decision. He was not performing the gesture for the room. He simply was not willing anymore to do anything other than exactly this. The family watched them enter, not with the alertness of before, that frequency of monitoring, of cataloging, of assessing the unfamiliar. With something quieter and more complicated. The ants near the bay window had the expressions of women revising long-held positions and finding the revision uncomfortable, but not, perhaps, unwelcome. The great-uncle had returned from wherever he had retreated to and was standing near the fireplace with a glass of something amber, looking at the floor with the focused attention of a man reviewing his own history. Hejin stood near the edge of the room. Her surgical smile was gone. In its place was an expression Jordan had not seen on her face before. Unguarded. A little young. Almost uncertain. She met Jordan's eyes for a fraction of a second, then looked away. It was not an apology. It was not yet even the beginning of one, but it was the first honest thing Hejin's face had offered all evening. And Jordan filed it away without judgment. Some reckonings take time. Jordan understood that. She had done enough of her own. Hanmoni had been guided to her high-backed chair at the head of the room by the youngest daughter of the eldest aunt, a woman in her 40s named Soyeon, quiet throughout the evening, who now moved with a purpose that suggested she had been waiting for something to shift so that she could show what she was made of. She settled Halmoni into the chair, brought her tea from the sideboard, said something low and private into the old woman's ear. Halmoni listened, nodded once, and then looked across the room at Jordan. She did not look away this time. Jordan held her gaze, not as a challenge, as an acknowledgement, as two women who had tested each other in the rain and emerged knowing things they had not known before, and who were now deciding, together and separately, what to do with that knowledge. It was Soyeon who spoke first, to the room rather than to any individual in it. She spoke in Korean, and her voice had a quality that stopped side conversations. Not loud, but carrying in the way that voices carry when they are saying something that has been waiting a long time to be said. She spoke for perhaps 40 seconds. When she finished, she looked at Jordan and switched to English without breaking the cadence of what she was saying. "My son is 8 years old," she said. "Last year, he asked me why his drawings at school always had to be one color at a time. A beat. I did not have a good answer for him. I hope to have a better one soon." Jordan looked at her. "That's a beautiful thing to say." Soyeon nodded once, in the particular Korean way that compresses entire sentences into a single motion, and stepped back. The room exhaled. It was not forgiveness. Not yet. Not entirely, not from everyone. Jordan did not need it to be. She had not come into this family seeking forgiveness because she had never done anything that required it. And one of the things she had learned about herself in the last 2 years in the quiet spaces between the microaggressions and the strategic exclusions and the silences calibrated to diminish, was that she was not willing to perform contrition for the crime of existing. That was a line she had drawn before she ever walked into this house the first time, and she had kept it.
What she needed was not forgiveness. What she had received was something more durable. Recognition. The recognition of a matriarch who had spent 84 years building a world according to one set of rules, and had stood in the rain tonight and seen, for the first time, the cost of those rules reflected in the face of a woman who refused to be diminished by them. That was enough. That was, in fact, more than enough. Yeonjun squeezed her hand. She looked at him. "Are you hungry?" he asked. "You barely ate." She laughed. She had not expected to laugh, and the laugh surprised her. And the surprise of it surprised the room, because it was not a polite laugh, not a social laugh, not the carefully modulated version of herself she offered in spaces where she felt watched. It was the real one. The full one. The one that Yeonjun heard in her studio at 2 a.m, and in the car when a song came on that neither of them had been expecting to love. And in the particular silence after a long day when they sat on the couch and she put her feet in his lap and he did not move them. The room heard the real one. And something in the room, not everything, not all at once, responded to it. Soyeon smiled. A cousin near the window made a quiet sound that might have been a laugh of its own. The 16-year-old girl at the edge of the doorway pressed her lips together in the specific way of teenagers who are being moved by something and are not ready to admit it. "I could eat," Jordan said. Yeonjun turned to the room and said something in Korean. Within 30 seconds, 2 of the staff had appeared from the kitchen and were quietly resetting the table. The great-uncle moved toward his original seat. Soyeon guided Hanmoney's chair forward. People settled. Jordan sat down at the table. Not in the corner, not in the far-edge seat beside the empty chair. She sat, and this was not something anyone announced or arranged. It simply happened in that organic way that things happen when the geometry of a room has truly shifted. 3 seats from the center. Beside Soyeon. Across from a young cousin who looked at the ring on her finger with eyes that were trying very hard to be subtle and failing completely. "It's beautiful," the young cousin said in careful English. She looked about 20. Her name, Jordan would learn before the evening was over, was Minji, and she was studying architecture in Seoul and had opinions about interior design that she had been too intimidated to share all evening, and would now spend the next 40 minutes expressing with enormous enthusiasm. "Thank you," Jordan said. "He has good taste." "He has extremely specific taste," Yeonjun said from beside her, in the dry register he used for humor. The one that most people missed entirely because it came with no additional signaling. "I spent 4 months looking for that setting." Jordan turned to look at him. 4 months. You have strong opinions about white gold versus yellow. You remembered that? I remember everything you say. Simply, factually, in the way that he said things that should have been romantic and instead came out as statements of operational reality, which was, Jordan had long decided, the most romantic thing about him. Across the table, Minji was watching them with the expression of someone storing this interaction carefully for future reference. Halmoni at the head of the table lifted her teacup. She said something short. Soyeon translated softly for Jordan's benefit. She says, "In this family, we do not make toasts with tea." A pause. She is asking for the wine. Laughter moved through the table. Real laughter, uneven and imperfect and overlapping, the way laughter sounds when it is not being performed for a room, but is simply happening because something genuinely funny has occurred. Even the great-uncle, Jordan noticed, made a sound that was unmistakably close to one. Wine was brought. Harmony held her glass. She looked at Jordan across the full length of the table, across the white flowers and the crystal and the 38 people who had spent an evening looking at Jordan without seeing her. And she raised the glass 1 inch. A single, minimal gesture. From a woman for whom every gesture was precise and deliberate and meant exactly what it appeared to mean, and nothing more and nothing less. Jordan raised hers. The table raised theirs. And in the room where an hour ago a woman had been told she did not belong in the story was rewritten. Not dramatically. Not with a single grand declaration that erased everything that had come before it, but in the way that real revisions happen. At a table, over wine, with imperfect people deciding, one small gesture at a time, to try. That night, long after the family had said their goodbyes, and the fleet of black SUVs had carried the last of the guests into the dark. Long after Minji had exchanged numbers with Jordan and extracted a promise about visiting the studio in Manhattan, and Soyeon had pressed Jordan's hand once, briefly, at the door, saying nothing, which said everything. Jordan stood in the bedroom of the Choi estate and looked at her hand in the lamplight. The ring, the white gold, the diamond that had waited 4 months in a box for exactly the right rain and the right driveway, and the right woman standing in it. Yeonjun came to stand behind her. He looked at their reflection in the mirror, both of them together, in the warm light of a house that was becoming, increment by increment, something that had not existed before tonight.
"What are you thinking?" he asked. She looked at their reflection for a long moment. "I'm thinking," she said, "that your grandmother has your eyes." He was quiet. "The way she finally looked at me," Jordan said. "When she decided to actually look. It was the same." She paused, completely certain, like she had already made the decision and was just waiting for her face to catch up. He did not say anything for a moment. Then, "She built everything we have, everything I am. I know. She was wrong tonight. I know that too." Jordan turned to face him. "She also walked down 7 steps in the rain to put her hand on my face. So she gets to be both." He looked at her, the same look from the driveway, that private geography, that version of him that had no other audience. "You are going to be very difficult to be married to," he said. "Extremely," Jordan agreed. Outside, the rain had stopped. The driveway was empty and wet and gleaming under the estate lights, and the iron gate stood open the way it had been left when the fleet came in, wide open and unguarded and waiting. The story that had been sealed for generations had, in the space of one cold November night, found a new door. And Jordan Marie, spine straight, curls drying, ring catching the lamplight on her finger, had walked through it. Not because anyone had finally let her in, because she had never, not once, agreed to stay out. Jordan walked into that room with her spine straight and her chin high, not because they accepted her, but because she never needed them to. And you know what carried her through 2 years inside that house? It wasn't just inner strength. It was knowing that every single morning when she looked in the mirror, she saw a queen. And she treated her skin like a queen deserves. Skin that glows, skin with depth, with that luminosity that doesn't need anyone's approval. If your skin has been through stress, hormonal changes, dark spots that won't fade, products that were never made for you,
There is a complete guide built on Korean science created specifically for Black women, with ingredients that respect your melanin, a full AM and PM routine, a 30-day method to transform your skin from the inside out. The QR code is on your screen right now, or find the link in the description and the pinned comment. Jordan never needed their permission to belong. You don't need anyone's permission to have the skin you deserve. Go get it. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever walked into a room that decided who you were before you opened your mouth? Judged you by what you looked like, where you came from, or who you loved, and still chose to hold your head high anyway? Have you ever been made to feel like you didn't belong in someone's story, only to realize that the people trying to write you out were the ones who had it wrong all along? And for those of you who have ever loved someone enough to stay through the hardest version of them and their world, did it ever ask more of you than it should have? And was it, in the end, worth it? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, love, and the kind of justice that arrives quietly, in the rain, right on time, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.